At the floor.
Hello, and thanks for having me, y'all. So this is your 5th week of doing this on like top of regular high school, right? That's impressive. Good job. So yeah, nice to meet y'all. My name is Audrey. I just graduated college about a year ago, and I just started my first full-time job shortly after that. So I've been working remotely for almost a year at Riot Games, which is a company that makes a few games now. Previously, we only made League of Legends, and there was a lot of jokes about it being Riot Game because that was the only game for about 10 years. And now there are more games, so it is actually Riot Games. And I work on a game specifically called Legends of Runeterra. I'm gonna share my screen though real fast. Okay, can people see these slides? Cool. Actually, before we start, do we want to go around and have people, do you want to introduce yourselves? We don't have that many people in here. Any who are comfortable want to go around and introduce yourself and then popcorn somebody?
Yeah.
I'm sure you've had to do this every week, so I apologize, but it'll be helpful for me.
Hi, my name is Betty.
Hello, nice to meet you.
My name's Lily.
Hello, Lily.
Maybe talk a little more about yourself.
Okay, since I like video games, if you like video games, tell me your favorite game. And if you don't like video games, tell me like your favorite ice cream flavor, maybe?
Okay. Hi, I'm Ridley. I'm a human being. Yeah.
Nice.
And I play way too much Apex Legends.
I have a lot of friends who play that. I myself am garbage at first-person shooters, so I don't.
It is a garbo game, but I'm addicted, so I can't stop playing it. Pain.
Anyone else want to go?
I'm Nick. I've been recently playing a lot of Rainbow Six Siege ranked.
Nice. That sounds stressful, but
it is stressful. I play every bro. Yeah, it's a stressful experience.
Cool. Anyone else want to share games they play or introduce themselves or both?
Hi, I'm Maddie.
Hello.
And I guess my favorite game at the moment is Genshin Impact. I like to play other big adventure games though, too. But that's like my favorite at the moment, so.
Yeah. Who's your favorite character in Genshin?
That's tough, but I think either Zhao or Albedo. I was only able to get Zhao though.
Nice. I only played for like a month after release, and I got Mona, and then I promptly stopped playing. So that's my achievement.
Oh, nice. Cool.
Cool. I see we got some new people who just joined. Welcome. All right. Does anybody else want to share? Last chance, and then we can get started. All right, cool. So let's get going. Again, my name is Audrey. If you just showed up, nice to meet you. So I'll start with a little bit about myself. I just graduated from UC Berkeley in 2020 with a computer science degree. So at Berkeley, there's actually a couple programs for computer science. There's one that is focused more on electrical engineering and computer science, and one that is focused just on computer science. I got the one just in computer science, so don't ask me electrical engineering questions. And while in college, I did a lot of video game related things. Basically, since high school, I knew that I wanted to work in video games. I used to say like I wanted to make video games and be like a game developer. And that's not exactly what I do now, but I do work on games, which is cool. So while I was in college, I interned at a couple of different game companies. I interned at Electronic Arts for 2 summers, the devil of the gaming industry. Anybody who plays games probably knows. And I also interned at Riot Games for one summer, and now I work at Riot Games full time. So that worked out pretty well. And yeah, I'm a software engineer on a card game, a digital card game called Legends of Runeterra. How many of y'all have played of or like heard of digital card games like Hearthstone or like nice, you know, like MCG Arena? Does anyone play like physical card games? I play physical Magic, but not digital Magic, because rebuilding a collection digitally is not fun. Okay, cool. So maybe one person who plays card games. I highly recommend them. They're fun. And not that I've sponsored. I guess I am because I work for them. Play Legends of Runeterra. It's really fun. um, sort of sponsored. Anyways, yeah, it's a card game. It's free. You can play it on your phone or your computer. I'm gonna talk more about the game itself in a little bit. And I also have 2 cats. Their names are Minerva and Magic. Minerva is the black and white one on the left. Magic is the other one. They may or may not jump into and out of frame sometime during this talk. And yeah, I currently live in Los Angeles, which is where Riot's main office is. They have a bunch of offices all over the world, but I live in LA now. And before this, I lived in the Bay Area. And I'm from California, but I'm from Lake Tahoe, which is, if any of y'all have ever been in California, it's like a skiing mountainous kind of area. Where are you guys from? Like, quick sample. Because this is digital, so you could be anywhere, right? Like,
I'm in
anyone want to
Wisconsin.
share where they are?
I'm
Wisconsin,
in
nice.
Minnesota.
Minnesota, cool.
I'm also from Minnesota.
Nice.
I'm from
I'm
Wisconsin.
all the way up in Maine.
Ooh, that's like a lot. There's a lot of variety. Nice.
I'm in Wisconsin.
Multiple Wisconsins and multiple Minnesotas. Cool. Do y'all know each other in real life? Or are you like entirely separate parts of Wisconsin and Minnesota?
No, I don't know.
Okay.
I know none of these people.
That's fair.
Real life.
I'm assuming you all were assembled
Or
virtually,
before
so
this,
that
at
makes
least.
sense.
Yeah, for the fellowship at least.
Cool. Yeah, so I am like very much just from and in California. And yeah, also throughout this, I want this to be not so much of me like talking at you and more of just kind of us all chatting. So if you have questions, if you want to ask me literally anything, just like stop, like interrupt me. I don't mind. Raise your hand, do whatever. Yeah, so feel free to ask whatever you feel like asking.
You said you work with Valorant game, right? Or is it just the card game?
I just work on Legends of Runeterra, so just the
Okay.
card game.
Can you give me
Not
some
Valorant.
can you give me some card game cheat codes?
Unfortunately not. There is a cheat
Oh.
console, but you can't
Oh.
access it when you're not in a dev build, so it's not actually useful for cheating.
Dang, I thought I could get some cheat codes.
However, if people are interested, I can give out Riot gun buddies for Valorant and also fist bump boards for League.
What are
So-
Riot gun buddies?
It's like in Valorant, I've never played Valorant, but there are gun buddies which are like little keychains on your gun, as far as I know. And there's one that's like a little
Oh.
Riot logo, and I am allowed to give that out. So if people play
No,
Valorant, and
I've
want
played
that,
Valorant before. I've played Valorant before. It's not really my thing.
it's not my thing either. I don't like first-person shooters, which I've already said earlier, but I play most other kinds of games. All right, so swiftly moving along. So here's a little bit about sort of my like technical journey, I guess. So I started coding in high school, but I didn't really start doing anything super serious until college. So I first started out by making websites and doing kind of like web development just for fun. I'm personally a visual learner, so I really like things that I can code and then have like an immediate visual output, as opposed to like coding something and then like digging through logs and trying to figure out what happened. So websites are great for that because it's literally like you can create a website with like 4 lines of code and it will be a website. It will be there. So for me, that was a great place to start. And yeah, I basically just made things like this website looks like the galaxy. And when you click on this planet, it gets bigger. Woo, like nothing actually useful, just like stuff for fun. And then I got a little bit more into game dev as I got into college. So I am not really a game developer. I don't actually work on the game itself at my job, and I have never really worked on games themselves, but I've done it for fun on the side. So I do have some experience with things like Unity, which is a game engine, Phaser 3, which is a web-based game engine. So if you like web and games, that's like a good intersection. And most of my game dev experience comes from doing like projects for classes, game jams, like fun side things. And at my current job, I work on what's called live services. So Legends of Runeterra is a live game. It's up all the time. And it's essentially my job to keep it that way. So my team actually has periods of what's called on call, where we are on call for usually a week at a time, like once every 2 months ish. And during that week, if the servers go down, if anything goes wrong with the game anywhere in the world, I will be paged regardless of the time of day. So you might get woken up at like 2 a.m. and they're like, hey, nobody can play the game in Europe right now. Get on that. And you're like, okay. So that's one facet of my job, is kind of like keeping everything running. And it's very back-end focused. So in the case of Legends of Runeterra, the front end would be the game client itself, like the part that you interact with as a player, where you put the cards and stuff. And I have very little to do with that part. I pretty much work on the other part, like the game servers, matchmaking, managing what's in a player's inventory, that sort of thing. So it's a lot less interesting to talk about, but it is actually pretty fun to work on. Any questions so far? Cool. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about Legends of Runeterra. I've already talked about it a bit, but it is a card game, as I've said a few times. It's most similar, I would say, to like Hearthstone, which is an older card game that you may or may not have played. It's also kind of similar to things like Magic Arena, which is a digital version of Magic the Gathering. And it came out just about a year ago. We're celebrating like the first anniversary right now, so that's pretty exciting. And it's the second game ever released by Riot Games, since League of Legends was the only thing for a long time. So it was pretty exciting for the whole company when this came out. It was like, oh my gosh, there are actually multiple games at this game studio now. Who'd have thought?
Wait,
Oh yeah, go ahead.
was League of Legends made by Riot Games?
Yes,
Oh,
it was.
I did not know that.
It was the only thing made by Riot Games for a really long time.
Oh, okay. So that's how Valorant was so known right away.
Yeah, so that's how Valorant was. Everyone was excited for it, because it was like, oh, this is a big game studio making an FPS. Yeah, Valorant, for those of you who might not know, Valorant is another game that Riot makes. It's a FPS first-person shooter game. I myself don't play it, but I've heard good things. I've heard it's fun. If you like that kind of game. Yeah, so this is what Legends of Runeterra looks like. This is like the board. It's not super important for like the purposes of this talk, but in case you're interested. And yeah, it's a good time. Anyone have any questions about the game? Alrighty. So now let's talk a little bit more about what's behind the game, like behind the scenes. How does the dev team itself work? So on Legends of Runeterra, we have basically 3 main chunks, and then also leadership, which is kind of like external. So leadership is a group of like a small group of people, like 4 or 5, and they're the ones who make all of the important product level decisions. So they're choosing like the direction of the card game. They have final say on all kinds of important things. So for example, if I'm on call and something goes wrong, let's say like in all of Asia, nobody can get into a game right now because something with matchmaking is broken. If it's during the day and leadership is like awake and I don't have to bother them, it'll usually be their call if I'm allowed to turn off matchmaking in Asia while we get it fixed, for like X amount of time, because they want to make sure that they're making the best decision for the game and that it's not just like an engineer deciding to turn off a major feature and blocking everybody from playing in a certain region. So they are like final say on most important things.
So what happens if someone was really mad at the company and decided to just shut down everything?
Like if they like had like an external attack or something?
Yeah, or like an internal attack because they work for them or something.
I've never heard of anybody like going rogue from the inside. Like at least on a Riot. At other companies, I've heard like anecdotes of people who got fired and were mad and like wrecked everything. So technically possible, but there's a bunch of checks in place. Basically like as a person who has like access to the inside like that, even if I did wreck it briefly, everybody would be able to unwreck it because I'm just one engineer and like all the other engineers have the same level of power as me, you know? So they would just
So I
fix
guess
it
you would need
fast.
to make a big team of attackers at that point.
You would need like some kind of large scale inside operation, which
Yeah.
is hard. But we actually did get DDoS not too long ago. So if you
Ooh.
are not familiar, DDoS stands for distributed denial of service. And in layman's terms, it's basically just somebody hooked up a bunch of computers and told them to spam our servers repeatedly so that they go down. But we have stuff in place to handle that. So yeah. We do get attacked occasionally. Riot's websites are DDoS more frequently than like most other websites. There's like you can look up stats on like which sites for which companies get attacked the most, and Riot's are way up there. I guess there's a lot of intersection between salty gamers and people who are capable of attacking websites. That's my guess.
Well, I guess League of Legends is one of the big like things where people get salty from.
Yeah, League of Legends is known. It's known as a game. It's very competitive. It's a 5v5 game, and people are very, very angry when they lose.
Yeah.
It's having kind of a toxic community. But it's also pretty fun. I play a lot of League. So yeah, back to the dev team. So other than leadership, there are 3 big chunks. So there is gameplay, PXM, and production engineering. So the gameplay side is probably the most interesting sounding side, because they are the ones who actually make the game. They make the client, they make the cards. They're the ones who make like paper prototypes of the game of new sets and like play them against each other to decide if they like how the cards are working. And they do all of the like initial balancing before they release cards. So they're the ones like, yeah, basically making every facet of the game itself when you are literally playing it. And there's a lot of cool things in that chunk of the dev team as well. Like the artists are technically part of gameplay as well. And then we have PXM. This one is very similar to gameplay, but they handle like the meta aspects of the game. So they're in charge of balancing cards after they have already been out for a while. So when we make release balance patches, we might actually change values on cards after they've already been out to like make sure that the meta is good. I'm not super competitive, so I don't know tons about the card meta for specifically this game. But they handle things like that and worry about balance. And they also handle things like events. So we'll have special events that sometimes tie in with League of Legends events or other events like on Riot Games. It'll be things like we had one called Lunar Revel for Lunar New Year, that sort of thing. So they're in charge of doing special events, cosmetics for those events, that sort of thing. And then there's production engineering, which is the one that I'm on, and it's probably the least interesting to talk about, unfortunately. We handle all the back end. We can keep the services running, the game servers running. We make sure people can matchmake and get their inventories and those sorts of things. And it's also probably the smallest team, and we're pretty much just engineers. Every other team has like a mix of like producers and artists and game developer types. But production engineering is the sort of team that would exist at basically any tech company with a live service. Very little of what we do is special like for a game. It's just like engineering, like general CS type stuff. Any questions about any dev team related stuff?
How many engineers are there that are in the production engineering with you?
Good question. So we've been hiring a little bit more recently. I think we're at 30 now total on all of production engineering. All of Legends of Runeterra has about 150 people. So we have 30 on production engineering, and on just my chunk of production engineering, which is called services, we have about 10.
How long does it take to make like one new card with all the people working?
I think so. I'm not super involved with that, but it does take a long time. Basically, new sets of cards. That's why we release them in sets. They are usually being made like a couple years in advance, like a year to 2 years.
Oh my.
Yeah, so it's similar to most card games have very long schedules like that. So they have to do things like anticipate how the card meta will look like 1 year from now. Yeah, like pretty long lead times.
That's a while.
Definitely.
So like there's some cards that haven't been released yet that have been being worked on for a while.
Yeah. Most cards get worked on for a super long time. We'll play test them internally, usually like a few months before they actually go live.
So when the game was first created, were there like a bunch of sets being made at the moment, like that were gonna get released later on because it took a while?
Yeah. So like when we released with the first set, but the next 3 sets were already in production.
So you're playing ahead, hoping it was gonna be good or a success.
Yeah, so it's kind of like a lot to gamble on, because like all these people are working on all this stuff, and if the game had just not succeeded, then all those cards would have gone into the garbage.
Oh, that would suck.
But luckily, it's doing pretty well, so it didn't happen. Yeah, good questions. All right. So now I'm going to talk a little bit more about how to get into game dev if you're interested in doing so. So I'd say some of the advantages of game dev as like a way to get into CS is that first off, lots of people like playing games. Most people have played some kind of game at some point in their life. Second off, making a game is a pretty concrete goal. If you have an idea for a game and you want to make it, like that's something to strive for, versus just saying like, go make a website. Like that's so nebulous and vague. It's like, what would I make a website for? Or like, why would I want some program that does X? You have to like, think of what it's going to do first. But with a game, you're like, well, I just want to make a game and I want it to, draw from these other games that I've played and be similar in these ways. So since the goal itself is much easier to conceptualize, I think it's a lot more friendly to like beginners and people who are just trying to get into CS or who are not sure if they even like CS. And the nice thing about game dev is there are so many different facets of it that there's game designers who don't actually code, but do a lot of things related to like deciding how the game's mechanics will work. There's people like me where I do pretty much strictly coding and it's not even super related to the game, but I'm still on a game team and get to be in like that game environment, which is really nice. And then there's like artists, producers, like all kinds of people in between who do all sorts of things. So basically any job you can picture that you would think you might want to have, it probably exists at a game company. So if you really like games, like you can go and get that job at a game company. So if you are interested in game dev and you want to get started in it, there's a few ways. These are not like in any particular order. I just like the order I thought of them. So Unity, which is a game engine, has super great tutorials, and you can basically just walk through them, download Unity, and get walked through these tutorials to just make a super basic game in like under an hour. Unity itself is pretty complex. So I would say starting here, if you have absolutely no experience coding, might be a little overwhelming at first. So if you're like, I don't want to learn like a whole professional game engine, that's totally fair. There's a similar thing that that's like Unity but simpler called Scratch. So Scratch is not strictly for making games. You can also make like animations and like other interactive things. But it's basically a coding language, but everything is Lego blocks, and it's really great. So especially if you have little to no experience coding, it uses the same logical patterns as coding. So it'll still train your brain in like very useful ways, but it's very easy to get started, and you can even just work like from their website. So I put links in this. I'll share these slides with y'all after, so you can click on them. But it's just called Scratch. You can also probably find it. And yeah, basically you just connect together blocks to make things happen. You give it like a sequence of instructions. You're like, hey, I want this sprite to move left for 5 turns or whatever, that kind of thing. And so this is one of the ways that I started like making games when I was in high school, very early on. And it's really fun. Highly recommend it. And another thing is just modding games. This one is probably the most challenging of everything on this list. So let's say you already have been doing things like using Scratch and Unity, or you've already tried coding, you feel like pretty confident about your abilities. Then look at some of your favorite games and see if people make mods for them. So most games have modding communities. Not like all games. It's a lot harder for console games to have modding communities just because it's harder to like mod on a console. But if you play PC games, there's a high chance you'll be able to find a modding community for any game you play there. And modding is great because it's usually really easy to find other people's projects and just kind of like jump on board. So let's just say, have y'all played Skyrim? Cool, I see a bunch of nods. Skyrim is one of the most heavily modded games in the existence of ever. Everybody has probably seen like the mods where you turn the dragons into Thomas the Tank Engine and things like that. So Skyrim's a great example of a massive modding community doing whatever they want. So with something like Skyrim, let's say you're like, oh man, I'm playing Skyrim, but I really wish there was more dogs. There's not enough dogs in Skyrim. Chances are you can find somebody else's project that is already similar or in progress, and you can like jump on and be like, hey, I see you're trying to add more dogs. I also would like to add more dogs to Skyrim. And then you can like work with them. Most people modding online are super friendly and they like meeting new people and working with new people, and they'll collaborate using stuff like GitHub. Y'all use GitHub yet during the fellowship? Like a little. It's basically just it's a place to store your code and share it with other people. And it makes it a lot easier to collaborate, even if you've never met somebody in person. So there's tons of projects that you can find and like start participating in. People will straight up teach you and help you. Lots of modders are very, very friendly. And the last one is by participating in things known as game jams. So game jams are similar to hackathons, but specifically for making games. If you're not aware, hackathons are usually like you get together with a team for a weekend and it's like, all right, you have 48 hours, like make an app or like make a thing. And it's usually pretty vague. And sometimes there's a prompt, but not always. And then you just code for 48 hours straight and you don't sleep and you drink a lot of coffee. And And usually it's kind of a mixed experience. Like you'll be really tired at the end, but you will have made something, and that's the cool part. So game jams are that same idea, but make a game instead of just make like an app or like some coding project. And these are really, really fun. There are also game jams for people of all experience levels. So at my college, they just put on one recently for people where there was like no experience required, and then they would basically pair people with like less experience with teams of people with more experience, so that everybody could kind of learn from each other. And the games they made were legitimately very cool. So it's really interesting to see what people can make in just 3 days. And at the end of the day, you'll come out of it and be like, I like made this thing, can point to it, can tell people about it when I'm like applying to things. So game jams are super, super helpful. Highly recommend. Yeah, any questions about these specific things?
About the game jams, which ones like were your favorite, and which ones might have not been, and
Ooh,
like why?
that's a good question. So I've only actually done a couple. I've never done like a recurring game jam, so I don't know if I have like a favorite. But I did one. So there's a club at my university called Cal Women in Gaming, club for women who like to game, as the name implies. And so we just started putting one on every year, and that one was really, really good and fun. I would say that's probably my favorite because a lot of the people had less experience, and were still able to make really cool things. I don't know if I have a least favorite. I've never been to one where I like had a bad experience, which is pretty good.
Cool, because I was thinking of maybe trying something out like that eventually. So yeah.
Yeah, and the good thing about the pandemic, sorry, that's gonna sound weird. The good thing about the pandemic is everything is online now. So online game jams are actually totally a thing and very easy to find. So yeah, like just do some research, see if there's any happening. Sometimes they'll have topics or like like requirements based on your experience, but you'll definitely be able to find one that fits you if you're interested. And yeah, super fun.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Any other questions about game dev stuff? Cool. So this is my last official slide. I wanted to open the floor now to just kind of have y'all ask me whatever you want. Basically, like to define that, you could ask me about getting into college, joining clubs in college, getting internships. What is it like applying for jobs? Like literally whatever you want. You can ask me about games. You could just sit here and talk about games for a while. I'm also fine with that. I don't want to assume that everybody just loves games though. So yeah.
I'm deciding between like to go into game development in college or something. That's what I wanted to do at first, but I don't know. I'm just thinking about it still.
Nice. What like made you want to go into game dev?
I just like games, so I wanted to make them
That's totally fair. Same.
or work on them at least. I don't need like to make my entire new game for myself.
Nice.
Yeah.
On that, actually, on that, what do you think are the tracks that people should like, I guess, go for, maybe in college or maybe in high school right now, if they want to, get into if there are like any classes or majors that they can select at different schools or any preparational classes that they should take?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for me, when I was going to college, a big part of the consideration was basically like how I already knew I wanted to work on games. So the main thing I was thinking about was how much does it matter that my major is related to games? So in the end, my decision was between going to UC Berkeley for just computer science and going to UC Irvine for game development. And so I wasn't sure. I was like, well, okay, if I just do computer science, maybe I won't actually get to work on games. But if I do game development, maybe I won't be able to work in any other industry. Like I'll just pigeonhole myself into games, and I didn't really want like either of those. So I would say in the end, the track you pick is going to have very little bearing on your industry potential. Like you can work in any industry you want with basically any skill. So I would say like this is gonna sound cheesy, but like pick the college that you feel like you'll be happy on, and pick the major or the subject, or even just like the general area that is interesting and fun to you. Because for me, like for instance, that was just computer science. Like I turns out I just really like computer science, and I'm able to apply that to games. That's sort of like, I guess, sort of like an easy one, because obviously you need coding to make games happen. So if you find yourself really enjoying computer science, like you don't have to get a game dev degree. You can just go and learn computer science and apply that to making games, because there's like very little difference in the things you'll learn. But if you also find yourself not liking computer science, you're like, this coding's not really for me, but I still want to be involved in making games. Like that's also totally fine. There's like people who do things like producers, where their whole job is to just like make decisions, and like product managers, where their whole job is to just like shepherd other people and schedule things and make sure everything happens on time, which sounds like not a job, but it is, and it's extremely hard, and I have a lot of respect for them. So basically there's all kinds of things you can do. And yeah, well, I had a thing to say after that. Yeah, okay, I lost it. Yeah, so any major you pick, if you wanted to apply it to games, you probably can.
Were there any requirements of like classes you had to take to understand what you're doing now? Or is it just something you can kind of build off of later on your own?
Ooh, that's a great question. I'd say it's sort of a mix. So for me, surprisingly, the computer science curriculum at UC Berkeley that I went through ended up having very little to do with the actual things I do at my job, on like a technical basis. So for instance, the language that I work in most often at my job is C#. I have never taken a C# class or been taught C# by anybody in a college or high school or anything. And like turns out I didn't really need to, because the things that I was taught in college were much more like soft skills, I guess. Like I learned how to write a good program, and like how to orient my objects properly, and things like that, which can be applied to like any language. But the actual strict skills that we were learning didn't really end up translating to the jobs that I ended up having later. Another example is I had jobs related to web development, because I had sort of like this self-taught web dev background. So some of my internships were making websites, but I never took any class at Berkeley that taught me how to make websites. So it's kind of interesting, because like with something like computer science, you don't end up being taught necessarily specific things for the job, but you're being taught more of like frameworks of thinking, how to make projects and work with other people. And there will be specific technical things that end up mattering. Like I took a class on like how internet networking works, and that's pretty important because I now work on backend services. But I could pretty comfortably say that like the classes that I took, you just kind of pick and choose. For specifically Berkeley, you take like a couple of lower division classes that teach you the basics of computer science, and I would say those classes are the most important for jobs, because that's what most jobs are. It's just applying those basics to like a specific project and like a specific environment. And then every other class you take is just kind of a random one that you choose. It's just like you should take 6 of these upper division classes in whatever subjects you feel like. And so those ones mattered a lot less. And they were just kind of whatever I felt like. So I took like a class on like artificial intelligence, because you got to make games in that class. And I haven't used any part of it, but it was really fun. Sorry, does that answer your question? I think I rambled a little bit.
Yeah, I think it does. I was thinking like if I would need physics by any chance, because I did not take that class yet.
I have never taken a physics class in college. The last physics class I took was in freshman year of high school. I'm doing fine. So if you're not good at physics, you'll be fine. Oh, a slightly related thing. I don't know if any of y'all are not good at math. You can be good at CS and not be good at math. I am really not good at math.
Okay, that's a relief.
Because you hear a lot, like, you know, you think someone's good at math, they're going to be good at computer science. Those kinds of people seem to go together a lot. No, it's like break that stigma. Be garbage at math and great at coding. It's fine.
Well,
the trick is you have algorithms to do the math for you, so
well,
you don't ever have to do it.
The problem is with that is like colleges always look for high grades in math sometimes.
Yeah, I think the hard part of getting into college is they look for high grades everywhere. And especially if you're going to a technical program, they'll care more about like your technical grades in high school. So yeah, to backtrack a little, I'm not saying like fail your math classes. That's a bad idea. However,
just get by, I guess.
Yeah, if you just feel like you're getting by and you don't really love it, like that's fine. Coding and math are generally not very related unless you're getting into some very deep technical topics. Like if you're like, I want to do machine learning, but you don't have to worry about that too much because that's like college level.
Yeah, something I didn't realize in high school was that you have a lot more control over what you can and will not take in college. So you can actively avoid taking some classes that you do not want to spend time on. I think people have complained about Berkeley's math classes being overly complicated, and I think I'm just going to go around them until when they have to take a math class, I'll take it.
Yeah, you can kind of prepare by looking at like when you find a college you think you might want to go to, you can kind of look at class lists for whatever majors you're considering, just to kind of figure out how much of any subject you might have to deal with. So for me and for Berkeley, I had two options for CS. Like I mentioned earlier, there was like an electrical engineering CS option and then just a regular CS option. And the electrical engineering option required a lot more math. And I think actually some physics and other things. And I was like, I don't like any of those. So I just did the other one. So you can like kind of look ahead and see, hey, does this school put a heavy emphasis on math for its CS program? And if it does, like maybe don't go there. If you don't like math.
I'm just bad at algebra. I'm good at geometry, but I'm just bad at algebra.
Dude, algebra sucks. Geometry was way better.
I hated algebra.
I hated geometry just purely for the triangles at my school. There's like 2 units at my school just purely on triangles, and I was so sick of them.
It seems like a lot of triangles.
I hated geometry because we had to write a bunch of proofs for it.
Proofs suck.
Way too many triangles.
104 proofs.
There are classes you might have to take for CS that involve proofs, but they're very minimal, and I skated by with like a passing grade, and it's fine. So proofs are not a thing you have to know for CS.
Ooh, in my high school calculus class, when we're writing proofs, I think our teacher prepared a tissue box on the side, just in case, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, just like I'm just curious, what grade are y'all in? Because I know this whole program is like 9 to 11th, so like.
I'm in 10th.
10th.
I'm a junior.
Junior.
So 10.
Yeah, junior.
Junior.
Nice. So are y'all for the juniors, are you starting to like think about college apps? Starting to like look at places? Nice.
Yeah.
I will say from what I remember, junior year was the hardest of high school for me. Senior year is mostly just focusing on college apps, which is not fun. But it does get a little better.
Once you get through like college apps and like once you submit everything, the paying will be waiting for it. But like starting from February to like May, you have absolutely nothing to do. So.
Second semester of senior year of high school, you don't do anything at all. It's great.
Yeah.
Where you do very little things. Cool. Oh yeah, something else that I didn't talk about yet that I kind of wanted to like spout off about. Once you get to college, one of the greatest things that I found at Berkeley that I think helped me the most, like more so than classes or majors, was the clubs and communities that I joined at Berkeley. So that's also something that I kind of didn't know to consider when I was in high school. I just looked at colleges for their majors. I don't know, I looked at their campuses and I'm like, yeah, sure, it looks good, I guess. But I didn't really think about the effect that the extracurriculars would have on me, because in high school they were mostly just like, you do clubs so that you can have something to put on your college application. Like that's it. But in college itself, clubs and extracurriculars can be like so much more impactful. So for me, I basically tried to join every single club that was related to video game development in any way. I joined the League of Legends club because I liked League of Legends. And that itself led me to be able to kind of get connections at Riot, because we had Rioters come to campus and talk to us at the League of Legends club. So that's the kind of thing I literally couldn't even imagine happening in high school. Like, why would joining the League of Legends club be helpful to my career? But it was. So basically, when you're a freshman in first semester freshman in college, you won't have you'll just be acclimating, so don't worry about it too much. But once you've been there for a semester or two, start looking for clubs, find things you're interested in, and just join them, try it out. You'll meet lots more people, and find many more things that might be relevant to you and your career. So yeah, if it's game dev, find every game dev club and go and see what it's like and see if you want to do that, because that kind of thing will have much more lasting impact than your classes. I took a student-led class where they taught us Unity and we made a simple game by the end of the year. And I have talked about that in every single interview, job interview that I've ever had. And basically everybody was impressed, even though it was just a silly student-led class, and it wasn't officially part of my curriculum. I got a couple of units for it, which is not many. Basically, you'd be surprised by the things that end up mattering compared to your regular classes, because there's so many more things you can do in college. So for a place like Berkeley, that was possible because it's big. So consider how college size might affect your experience, and the diversity of the options that you might find for things to do on a campus. Since I've been talking a lot, what kind of things are y'all thinking about studying?
I'm not 100% sure yet, but I'm looking at aerospace engineering.
That sounds sick and also hard. Wow.
I'm thinking of going into some type of engineering.
Same here. Some type of engineering.
Nice.
Yeah, don't know. I'm probably gonna do engineering, but I don't know what kind of I want to do yet.
Same. I'm not quite sure yet. Kind of just picking what I like and what I don't, and going from there.
Nice. Yeah, another thing to consider is you don't actually have to have your major all the way figured out when you get to college. If you have it a little bit figured out, that's a great start. But I know people who've switched their major literally 4 times, and that's fairly common. So if you feel like you get there and you're I still don't know what I want to do, that's fine. That's what a lot of people will be doing. So you just take some classes, figure out what you like, and switching majors is totally normal. So, what was I gonna ask? What kind of things have you all done at this camp so far? Or what's been your favorite thing so far?
I did last week's session. We were working with I forgot the name of it, but this hardware where we would code stuff into it, and we had to make a game.
Ooh, that's cool. What kind of game did you make?
I did a simple one, just Simon Says.
Nice. Was it with Arduinos?
Yeah, close. It's one of the Circuit Express from Adafruit. So it's basically a much simplified and much easier to use, and less breakable Arduino.
Nice. That sounds fun. If you enjoy doing hardware stuff, there's a lot more opportunities for that in college. So I had to take an intro electrical engineering course as part of my CS degree, and that was actually one of my favorite courses because the labs were really fun. It's just 3 hours of here, just mess around with these circuits, and we'll tell you what to do, so you don't have to worry about breaking things, but you can just kind of mess around. All right, as a follow-up question to that, have any of y'all tried to make a game? Or if you were to make a game, what would you want to make?
I've tried to make a game. I did something in Unity. I like did one of those assets things, but it was kind of confusing.
What kind
But
of game
yeah.
were you going for?
Well, I wanted to make a game that was kind of like kind of like a exploration.
Nice.
But I never really understood how to use Unity, so I couldn't do it.
Yeah, Unity is definitely a lot. Like for context, we use Unity to make Legends of Runeterra, my game. So it's like used by professionals. So kind of just jumping in can be a little overwhelming. What I did when I was learning to use Unity was basically just use some of the tutorials and then kind of use them as like a starting point. Because they set you up with like the basic objects and scripts so that you can have like a circle that moves when you press the arrow keys, and then you can kind of use that and go from there. Also, if the editor itself is intimidating, using Unity just in 2D is like a lot easier to start with. 3D is complicated, and also you might have to know how to like 3D model things, which is even more complicated, and I don't know how to do that at all. Has anyone else ever wanted to make a game?
I mean, I've messed around in Unreal a little bit. I wasn't really doing anything in particular, but I've messed around with it a bit, and I made a bunch of games in Scratch.
Ooh, nice. Scratch is awesome.
I mean, I've always kind of wanted to work on games in like little projects, but I can never come up with a good idea or where to start from it. So I guess if I could, I'd do some like RPG kind of thing, like 2D exploration, sort of like Nick.
Nice. Have you heard of there's software just for making RPGs? There's one called RPG Maker, which you might want to look into. Yeah, it's like it's an engine, like you can make full games with it, like Unity, but it's focused on 2D and RPGs, and I've heard it's like simpler to get into. So that might be cool to check out. And yeah, if you've ever found yourself sort of like interested in working on games or with games, but you don't feel like you want to come up with the whole game like from the ground up and make it, like that's also totally fine. That was kind of where I was at. Like I've never made a game fully by myself. I've only ever worked on like small teams, like in game jams or like in classes, where usually other people were doing a lot of the ideas, and I was just kind of coding them. And I found out that that was like my niche. That's what I like. I don't really want to come up with the game design, but I do like working on the game, and that's also totally fine. So if you're like just sitting there, and you're like, I want to make a game, but I can't think of like the game parts, like that's totally fine, because when you're working at a game studio, like there's other people who do that, and then you can just implement them and like work on the game itself without having to worry about like every part of the picture, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's the ratio between like, artists and less technical people and engineers in Riot Games, for example?
Ooh, at all of Riot, I'm not as sure. But on my team, I would say we actually have way more artists and non-technical folks. So like, let me go back real fast. Like in this thing, so production engineering is basically where like 90% of the engineers are, and it's only 30 people out of the 150 total. And then gameplay has like a few engineers. The people who work with Unity and like write scripts and things for the game are in here. So there's more in there, but there is definitely more like producers, designers, and artists and engineers. Maybe by like 2 to 1. I would say like probably have something like 50 total engineers and then 100 of non-engineers. That's like a rough estimate. And then on top of that, we actually outsource a lot of the art. So there's a studio called Six More Vodka that makes a lot of the card art. And so that's like a whole studio of people. Like I don't know how many people is there, but they make so much art that I'm assuming it's like at least like a dozen. And so that's just artists, and then they just send us assets to use. So yeah, generally way more non-technical folks than technical folks, at least in my game.
I guess I was kind of wondering, like, what do they do, or like, what would you do, kind of when like, I guess the game would almost like, I guess they like die and like they stop like producing more content for it and stuff. Like, is there like, do you move on to a new game or?
Yeah, that's a great question. Whenever I tell my parents about like my job, my dad is always like, "How's the game doing?" And I think he, in the back of his mind, he expects it to like go under any day, and then I'll be out of a job. So yeah, I think about that too. And in the gaming industry, most people that I work with have already worked at other gaming companies, like sometimes like many other gaming companies. So the industry itself, people move around within it quite a bit, and it's very like connection based. So like networking ends up being pretty important. So if like right now, if I got fired, like Legends of Runeterra somehow died and I didn't have a job tomorrow, I'd probably be reaching out to people at other places that I've worked, and reaching out to like former coworkers who have moved to other companies. So I'm like, oh hey, I'll talk to the people who I interned with when I was at Electronic Arts and like see if they have openings. Like I'll talk to my friend who moved to 2K, see if they have openings. So one of the nice things about the gaming industry is that people are so tight knit that like I can literally just go to my coworker who used to work at Blizzard and be like, "Hey, do you have a connection? Can you like get me in?" And that's kind of how a lot of it works. It's just with like internal networking.
Do you have any tips on maybe getting connections going and networking? Is it like kind of join clubs and go from there sort of thing?
Yeah, that's a great question. And yeah, clubs is like a really big part of that. So one of the clubs that I joined when I was in college was like a business club that was just focused on networking, specifically within like the entertainment industry, but there was a subset of it that was for video games. And that is legitimately how I got all of my internships because it got me my first internship, which got me my second one, etc. So yeah, those kinds of clubs exist where they'll do things like they'll invite professionals from a specific industry or like from a specific company even, and they'll just come to campus to talk to students. So sort of like this, but probably with like more professionals. And that's a really great way to get to know people and ask them questions about their job. And maybe if they're a recruiter, give them your resume, that type of thing. And so that sort of like initial connection is how you get your foot in the door. Because if you have just one person at a company that you can email, you now have like inside knowledge. They might be able to refer you, that sort of thing. So yeah, 100% clubs. There'll also be things like career fairs and other events at your college that are geared towards like getting people jobs. So just kind of like keeping an eye out for those things once you're in college, and going to them when they happen and just like meeting lots of people.
Do we have more questions?
Ask me literally whatever. Doesn't even have to be game related, even though I've been talking quite a bit about games.
I'm kind of all out of questions. Anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, if there's no more questions, I've sort of like said all my bits. So I don't mind ending a little earlier.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for coming. Yeah, and I think Audrey's contact information on the
So
slides.
if in case there's anything you wanted to ask me, or if there's something you want to ask me in like 3 years, this is my email. I don't mind. Literally reach out to me. Like we could schedule a chat and talk face to face. We can just email back and forth. If you have questions you don't want to ask right now for whatever reason, or if you think of something in 2 months, like just email me. I totally don't mind. I really like helping people like kind of onto the same path as me because it can be a struggle. So yeah, like feel free to reach out to me for anything. If you want me to read your college essays, like I'll do it. I'm serious. So here's my email. Feel free to email me whenever.
All right. I also posted that the slides and your contact information in our internal website, so you guys can also always have access to it afterwards too. Yeah. Thanks for coming. And this is awesome. Like this is one of the most interactive ones we've had so far, and I think people got a lot of the questions answered. Yeah. If that's it, I'll let you go, and yeah, I'll follow up with more information later.
Yeah, thanks
Go
for having
Bears.
me. Go Bears. And like good luck, y'all. And yeah, I will see you later.
See ya.
Bye.
And for everyone else, let me just quickly end this.